if Steph wins a fourth championship, a lot of conversations are going to start taking place. Because a fourth championship for Steph would mean that he has as many championships as LeBron James, twice as many championships as Kevin Durant, all in the same jersey, spanning a time period from 2015 to 2022. It'd be a remarkable accomplishment. Now, you're going to have some Warriors fans that are going to take, if that happens, that are going to take that and run with it like it's the end of the world, right? You're going to have comments like he's the best player of this era, he's better than LeBron, he's in the GOAT conversation, all this stuff. I wouldn't go that far because I think there's a difference between, like, Steph's titles in 2017 and 2018 alongside Kevin Durant don't match the degree of difficulty of any of LeBron's 4 championships. So I wouldn't put him on that level. However, you got to put him ahead of Larry Bird at that point. You got to put him firmly. You got to put him firmly in the conversation with like Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant. Now, for me, these lists get weird because I don't keep bigs on the same list as a guard. To me, they play a completely different sport. You're right. Like, if you can't dribble the ball up the floor and initiate offense, I don't think you should be in the same list as guys that do that. So I keep a separate list for all the greatest bigs of all time. And then my list for the greatest players of all time is like, I have MJ at number 1, I have LeBron at number 2, I have Kobe at number 3, then I have Magic, and then I have Larry Bird. I think you easily push Steph over Larry Bird for number 5, and I think you could make a solid case to put him even at 3 up there with ahead of Magic and ahead of Kobe. But the problem is I think there's a pretty big gap between 2 and 3 on that list. I think LeBron and MJ are on a tier by themselves atop the league. And you could even make the case that there's a little gap between MJ and LeBron. But like that's an amazing case for a guy that came up through Davidson, for a guy that had the beginning of his career marred by injuries, to definitively have a case as a top 5 perimeter player in the history of basketball would be an unbelievable accomplishment. Obviously, he still has to do it, but like, dude, it's there. It's the potential is there. They have the pieces they need to do it. It's the big part of it's going to come down to matchups. Phoenix played 3 really good centers tonight, right? Like 3 centers that had a deep impact against Dallas, right? So obviously there are going to be matchup problems for Golden State along the way. But they absolutely have a chance to do it. They're in that. I'd say Boston 1, I'd say Phoenix 2, and then I'd probably say Milwaukee, Golden State tied for 3. So all 4 of those teams have a real chance. And if Steph does it, like, man, he's got one hell of a resume at that point.
So I can't help but notice that you didn't bring up Kevin Durant at all in terms of the hierarchy. That's where my mind goes first, is comparing those two in this context. So do you think that Steph is just definitively past KD if he wins another title, like comfortably so?
I think Steph's definitively past KD right now.
Interesting.
The issue with KD's legacy is he got strapped to a really poor decision maker to start his career in Russell Westbrook. You guys all know how I feel about him. We don't have to get any further into that.
Yeah.
Then he won 2 championships, but they had an optic appear, like their optics of those 2 championships were poor. They just, you didn't see Kevin Durant have to dig deep down 3-2 in a series to pull out a tough game on the road. It was like the iconic moment of Kevin Durant winning his in those 2 years. The iconic moment is him hitting a shot over LeBron James. That was their 15th consecutive playoff win. Okay? Like, that just doesn't carry weight with the masses the way that LeBron having a chase down in a game 7 tied 3-3 when they were down 3-1, or, you know, like Steph Curry coming back from down 3-1 or down 2-1 in the year he won the title against Memphis or against Cleveland in 2015. Like, all of these guys that are ahead of him on the list, they have these like definitive moments of struggle. And then the problem is after KD wins these 2 relatively easy championships, he moves on to this Brooklyn situation where he hitched his wagon to another vagabond. And now he's dealing with Kyrie, and he's not available, and he's not winning here. So it's like, I think I've said this on the show several times, and I mean it. Like, there's a version of KD's story where he's the GOAT. And pretty much all it involves is being in better situations and a little bit better commitment to defense. Those 2 things would have definitively put him in that conversation. The issue, because KD's ceiling as a 3-level scorer and as a defensive rim protector is as high as any player who's ever played the game. Like, that's how good that guy is. But his resume just doesn't even come close to touching Steph or LeBron. Not even in the same, like, it's not close, in my opinion. The year in, year out, offensive engine stuff, the consistent competition for championships, he just doesn't compete with 10 trips to the finals or everything that Steph's done in a Golden State jersey. It's just not, I love KD. He's one of my favorite players, and I don't understand why so many people dislike him so much, because I actually find him to be one of the most likable players in the NBA. Like, he's so authentic. He doesn't bullshit you the way that LeBron does. Like, LeBron's literally tweeting out like, "Oh, ask me anything during the game tonight." It's like, dude, they're playing playoff games right now. Like, this isn't about you anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I find LeBron's my favorite player. I find him to be unlikable a lot of times off the court. Like, KD is super likable, super authentic. For whatever reason, he just doesn't resonate with people, and that's a huge bummer. But like, the reality of the situation is his basketball resume just doesn't touch Steph or LeBron's.
Well, first of all, Jason, I would just like to say I loved your use of the word vagabond, and I think that's a word that goes dramatically underutilized today. That's really interesting. Do you think it's so decisive? Because what I always find difficult to assess is like, yeah, obviously Steph checks a couple more boxes in terms of, I think, resume when you're talking about really winning the solo title and elevating a team that didn't have another true superstar, although it was an incredibly complete team, but obviously such a massively important offensive engine, one of the best that we've ever seen in terms of amplifying other talent, a phenomenal scorer in every way, like just an unbelievable offensive player. What's difficult for me is that I just don't know how many years of their careers I have thought Steph Curry is a better basketball player than Kevin Durant. Like, when they were together, there was always the information about how without KD, they would still cruise and they would be utterly dominant. And without Steph, things would kind of fall apart, right? And I think that's obviously true. And you see that with the on-off numbers throughout Steph's career. Like, he is utterly vital in a way that KD as a one-on-one scorer maybe can't replicate. At the same time, there was just always that feeling of like, okay, well, we know who can go to takeover mode in just a completely different way. We know who can average 35 a game in the finals. And, if we're slipping against the Clippers a little bit inexplicably, KD's going to be the one to average 35 a game and just completely cut this team's throat. And I just feel like he obviously has more longevity because Steph's peak came a little later. He is, to me, maybe the most skilled scorer of all time. I think he's certainly got to be in the top two. I think he's the most complete, given that just in Jordan's era, obviously, I mean, the three just wasn't as valued and wasn't a significant part of his arsenal. I mean, I do think he's the better defensive player throughout their careers. I think in terms of individual playmaking, Steph has a slight edge, but it's not massive. So it's just like the skill set thing for me, and just comparing them in my individual year to year, who do I think is the better basketball player? I feel like most years I come up with KD. So I don't know. Does that resonate with you at all? Like, is that a factor, or do you just disagree?
Dude, that all makes perfect sense. Like, and I get it. Like, here's the thing, dude. Like, there are nights where I watch Kevin Durant play basketball and I'm like, oh my God, that's the best basketball player I've ever seen. There are nights that I feel that way. In terms of like his complete otherworldly unguardability. But the reality of the situation is, and for the record, when I'm ranking basketball players, that's different than like an all-time ranking. Like, I told you guys, I thought Kevin Durant was the best player in the world this year. I had to relent after he struggled so much against Boston, but like that's how much I value what KD brings to the table as a basketball player on both ends of the floor. That's how much I value him. But resumes, the all-time rankings of players are strictly about results. It's just the reality of the situation. Now, again, he's had bad luck. Like, he didn't pick Russ,
Right.
And like how many playoff games did Russ take more shots than Kevin Durant in a big moment? Happen all the time. Like, you can make a serious case that Russ's decision making hampered Kevin Durant in his early playoff career. But like, the reality of KD's playoff resume is he struggled with a player that I thought held him back in a lot of ways. Then he won 2 championships on a team that had won 73 games without him, and so there was a level of ease that undercut the quality of that accomplishment. And then he hitched his wagon to Kyrie Irving, and it hasn't been enough talent for him to win a title. And so, like, the reality is as much as I value his individual skill set, He doesn't bring the results to the table that justify putting him in the conversations with guys like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, whereas LeBron's ahead of those guys and Steph is trending in the direction of being in that conversation. That's just, it's just a reality of the situation. And again, it's tough because I've talked about this before, but like LeBron, when he partnered with Dwayne Wade, I think he intended for that to be as easy as it was for KD and Golden State. It just happened to not. It happened to not be, and so LeBron had to reach back. Like, think of the summer after LeBron went to Miami was the summer when he became the better basketball player. Like he went to Miami and was humbled into having to make significant improvements. And that's the thing. Like that always resonates with the fans. The struggle resonates with fans. That's just the reality. It's why we root for underdogs. That's why you don't like it. That's why when there's a favorite every year that like when 2017, 2018 Warriors were around, everybody hated them. People don't like to root for the guy on top. They like to root for the underdog. They like to root for teams that are at a disadvantage. And so when they see a star with their back against the wall and they have to reach down deep and they have to pull something out of like the deepest, out of their deepest reserves as a basketball player in order to come out on top, that buys you so much cachet with the general public. And KD either has fallen short or accomplished it in a manner that appeared to be easy. And that just hurts you in the court of public opinion. We've talked about it on the show before, but again, you make a very good case, Carson, and you're right. There are a lot of years where I've been like, man, KD might be that guy. But for whatever reason, the results aren't there. And the specific conversation about all-time rankings, that's where the results matter the most.